Thank you, Chancellor. I just wanted to, first echo some of the sentiments of my colleague, Senator Savino, regarding the $868 million on the 5-year capital plan. There are schools in my district, as I'm sure most of representatives here, that are at least 100% or 150% over capacity. She had mentioned PS 13 on Staten Island. We've been talking to our local council member about that. We'd really like to maybe have a meeting with you regarding that particular school. Being with new developments in the mayor's affordable housing plan and the Mount Manresa development, we have significant concerns. Also, parochial school closures in that area have led to an overpopulation in that school. In the Brooklyn part of my district, there are two in particular, PS 176 and PS 127. The belief is that it's been the problem of illegal conversions in Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights area that have led to overcrowding at those schools. So certainly if we're going to be adding seats, if you could take a look at those as well. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the out-of-pocket expenses that teachers may be having in the schools. It just always seems interesting, I guess, to me that the state spends $9.5 billion this year for the city of New York, and it's gone up significantly over the last few years. We spend about $19,000 per pupil. Yet we always see the teachers don't have paper, they don't have basic supplies that they need to perform their duties. And so I'm very happy to see that the governor's put in a $200 tax credit for the teachers in this year's budget. I wish it would be $500, which is a bill that I and a couple of my colleagues have that would give it a $500 tax credit. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, first of all, good teachers always spend money out of pocket. I mean, I was a teacher for 22 years, and if I wanted to give the students a party, it came out of pocket. I wanted to buy something for the classroom that maybe was a little unusual or different, and in my case, always unusual or different, came out of pocket. It was part of the expenses at the time of doing my job. My husband, who's an accountant, would say to me, well, that's tax deductible. And I would keep my receipts, and you would have said the same thing. Sure. And I had a very large envelope of tax deductible. The same thing when I was a principal. Would buy books for my teachers, on my own. Would buy things for the school on my own. I think that's part of it. I do think having a tax credit would help. But I do think that if you want to do a job, there are always things you want to do that are different classroom to classroom. One teacher may want to do baking. I used to cook with my students one year every single Friday. There was no way that money was coming out of any school budget. There's nothing there for that kind of consumable, but I wasn't going to stop. I decided this year, I was teaching American history, that I had this book, the Cookbook of Presidents, and I would cook the menus that different presidents considered their favorite. Until I hit one president who liked lobster, and I stopped right there because I didn't have enough money to do that. But I do think you're always going to have that. I think whatever career you have, you're going to spend some extra money. I think certainly, we have Teachers' Choice, donors.org, which has been very helpful to a lot of our schools. But there's no easy answer to this in terms of, but I think the tax credit will go a long way to helping them.
Okay, great. In last year, 2015-16, New York City received $531 million in contracts for excellence funding. Of that, only $7.5 million went to Staten Island public schools, representing only about 1.42% of the funding. Staten Island public schools serve over 70,000 students, as you know, which represents about 6.2% of all New York City students. So if you were to do this proportionally, Staten Island should get about $31 million. So I just wanted to know how you make this determination.
Sure. The C4E money that you're referencing, there are state regulations promulgated on how the money gets distributed, and it's determined based on need, essentially. And so we look across the entire city at the neediest schools. And although there are needy schools in all boroughs, it seems that as the money gets distributed, Staten Island schools are comparatively less needy. That's not to say that they're not needy, please. Yes.
I still do believe, though, it should be more proportional based on population. I mean, we have this fight all the time with HHC, right? We want our fair share of hospital funding. We don't even have a public hospital, but we would say, well, give us our proportional share on population for those hospitals that we do have. So I think this is sort of a similar case, which we could talk at another time about.
Happy to. Happy to
thank
continue
you.
to talk about it.
Thank you for answering.
And just so you know, and many of you have already taken advantage of, any of you who want to have one-on-one conversations with any member of my staff or myself, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you.
And you deal with our InterGov team, and then just give us a heads up on some of the issues so we can research them before we meet.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions. I saw an article in the New York Times, I guess it was a few months ago, about the first day of school. You visited a school, PS 212 in Queens. They have a Move to Improve program.
The move, oh, yes.
The Move to Improve program. And included in that program is mindfulness programming, which I happen to truly believe in. I believe that this, mindfulness, meditation, quiet time, whatever you want to call it, I believe it is really a tool to help children focus, help their concentration, especially children with attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, children with autism. So I just would love to hear about what your thoughts are on this program and how do we get one in my district?
Well, this was a program, in fact, we had gone there for a totally different purpose. They were starting a dual language program, if I believe, and that's why we were there. The principal told me it was done as a result of teachers saying that life was too pressured and too rushed. So the teachers went for training, and really it's a very simple thing. It's really more about taking a deep breath and learning how to let out. I mean, I actually sat with the kids and did it, so I know it does work at that little level. But we made that a showcase school, which are schools that we think are doing something excellent, so other schools can go there and observe it and see if they can replicate it. The only thing that holds us back from doing that is the willingness of teachers to be trained in it. In this particular school, I think the principal had a guidance counselor that was trained in it, and she trained others. So it's certainly an encouragement, and principals can request it in terms of they want more training in it, but it ties in with all the things that we're doing in terms of mental health and wellness as in general.
How many schools in the city do that?
I don't know right now, but I can find out.
Okay, great. And I'd
That's
love to
the
come
one.
visit one with you if you would like to take me.
Now, that principal speaks very highly of it.
Great. I just got one last question. I read a report about this new policy on student behavior, about school discipline. And there was an article, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that said in October, they started giving out these cards now. They're warning cards instead of suspension. But there was one student who, in October, was, instead of, he was carrying 7 bags of marijuana. How does somebody like that get just a warning card? This is for high school students, too, and the warning card says you're supposed to take the card home and discuss it with your parents. I mean, this is not really realistic that we're going to expect a child, a student, a high school student specifically, to go home and discuss this type of stuff with their parents. I think it's in terms of, we don't want to suspend kids, right? If there were other circumstances in there, dressing inappropriately, cursing, whatever it was, I can understand that. But 7 bags of marijuana, to send them a card instead of sending them for suspension, I think is really not the right move. I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on this and
I
the
think
reason they changed the policy.
We have had a committee working on this for the last year almost, and I think we're trying to balance what is really behavior that needs to be constantly reprimanded or somehow penalized, and that we just part of normal behavior. So obviously that's something I'd have to look at. I don't know that case specifically. But one of the things that I'm very clear about is I started looking at kids who were suspended and how many, and some for more schools than others, and it was a big inconsistency. So in this school, you got suspended for X, but in this school, no. So we need to bring more of a systemic approach to suspensions. We also know that with suspensions, students who are suspended for too long tend not to go back to school at all. So would you rather have them in school learning and on a career path, or do you want them to make sure that they're the first natural dropouts? So this is something that we've spent more time, and we haven't really finalized it because we have to bring NYPD, principals' opinions, but we have a committee that's working on this. The stickiest point is the suspension around an issue called insubordination. And that means, what do we mean by it? What I consider insubordination, someone else might. So we're trying to codify what are some of the issues and what is the appropriate penalty for those issues. So in one school, it doesn't become 10 days, in another school, 20 days. So this is really something that we're working with. We do not have an answer as of right now, but it's part of the process of also making sure that some schools, and particularly in certain neighborhoods, don't over-suspend versus other schools that don't, that under-suspend. So this is a puzzle, a problem, but it's still in the works.
Okay, and I do think that it needs to be reexamined as we go forward, because, you know, we don't want what you said, which is insubordination. We don't want children or students to think that they can get away with disrespecting their teachers, their
Absolutely.
colleagues, or their
Now,
principals.
also, everybody has a right to feel safe in a school, not just students, but teachers and principals as well. That is what we guarantee, that if you send your child to school, they're going to be safe. So I take that very seriously.
Okay, thank you.